Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Alex Klann from Tiny Bite Wellness. Alex is an occupational therapy assistant who is a specialist in pediatric feeding. She has been working in this field for over 10 years and shares her tips openly with parents on her Instagram account at Tiny Bite Wellness and her website, tinybitewellness.com. Alex and I talk all about feeding in this episode and how it mirrors reading because we can teach our kids to learn to eat certain foods and we can teach our kids to read through play. And we want to empower parents to do both of those things, work with their child at home and know that they have the skills and qualifications to help their child in these areas. Alex is one of the 18 speakers at the Learn and Play to K Kindergarten Readiness Virtual Conference. That conference is happening June 3rd through the 7th, 2024. So if you are listening to this podcast in real time, tickets are still available through May 31st, 2024. After that date, tickets will be closed because the conference will be starting, so I don't want you to miss out. If you are listening to this before tickets close, head to bit.ly/learn and play to K, and you can snag your tickets and you can join Alex and I along with 16 other experts to learn how to prepare your child for kindergarten. If you have any questions about this episode, please reach out to me on Instagram at Littles Love Learning Blog, or you can reach out to Alex at Tiny Bite Wellness. Hey, Alex, welcome to the Littles Love Learning podcast.
Hi, Erin. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited that you're here. You and I connected online this past year, and you are a specialist with picky eating. And that is actually something near and dear to my heart because both of my children are more particular when it comes to eating, as I was when I was growing up as well. So I love all of your tips and advice online because I think it's really important to normalize what's going on with our kids. And you talk so much about that, but then give tips on how we can help our kids move forward and grow with their eating.
Thank you. Yeah, I love to keep it like super simple for parents and like making those tiny changes. They can be so impactful for our little ones. And I know parents, as a mom of two boys, how busy things are and how crazy meal times can be. So sometimes it's hard to remember all of the many things that we should be doing. So trying to simplify it for parents is definitely one of my goals.
Well, you do a great job on Instagram simplifying it for parents, but let's go back to the beginning. Before you had your business, Tiny Bite Wellness, before you started sharing tips for parents, how did you get into this space?
So we'll go back to undergrad. I was in a freshman psychology class, and we were watching a video on people working with children with different abilities. And I'd never been one to really like speak up in class, and something like moved inside me and I was like, oh my gosh, like who works with these children? Like this looks so amazing. Like I feel like I could be bring so much to them. And I asked the professor who worked with these kids, and he actually connected me with a community that worked with autistic children in Salisbury, where I went to school. I started working with this little boy, and he had a lot of sensory needs. And I was kind of like a respite provider. So I would go over to his house after, and his mom homeschooled him. So I would help with school and different routines. And we would go into like his sensory room, and I would push him on the swing and his bouncy ball. And his mom actually told me, like after the first day, she's like, you know what you're doing is occupational therapy. And I had never heard of OT. And I was like, oh, so that just like a light bulb moment what kind of went off. And I was like, I have to find out more about this. And it just seemed like that was my calling because it came so naturally to me to help kids with their sensory needs. From that, I worked in different OT clinics after I got my degrees. And my supervisor was actually like, there's this feeding conference. Would you like to go? And I was like, absolutely. I was like, my parents would be so happy that I finally put my love of food to good use. And I went for this training and started working with kids with feeding challenges, severe picky eaters, mostly with severe anxieties around new food, a lot of kids with autism, and just seeing how much progress they make in such a short amount of time was just amazing, especially through play, like having it be watching them lead and using their interest and getting them to do things that they normally would never do was just so amazing to me. So,
That is awesome. What a beautiful story. You have a heart for serving and for helping other people. And then you decided to take that information online to start Tiny Bite Wellness. So tell us about that journey.
yes, so I've been a pediatric occupational therapy assistant for over 10 years doing feeding therapy in the clinics. And after I had my two boys, I realized that there were so many parents looking to Facebook groups and getting poor advice, such as my child is only eating two foods, and other parents saying, oh, that's completely normal. And then in the clinic, I'd worked with families who couldn't get services because no one was available to take their child to therapy during work hours, or there weren't enough clinicians to see the child because of long wait lists. Like usually their wait lists are like 3 to 6 months for feeding therapy. And so I was like, I have to start making parents able to access this information. And so I was home. I just had my second, and I was like, well, might as well open my Instagram page and start sharing this knowledge to parents and showing them that little changes can have huge impacts on their child's nutrition and diet and meal times, and they don't have to be stressful.
Yes, and you're sharing with everyone, which is nice because someone who has a neurotypical child might not be seeking feeding therapy, but they're still struggling with those meal times. And you are giving tips that are impactful for all kids, regardless of their ability or how they're developing. What you're sharing is applicable to everyone.
Yeah, so that's what I really love about using your child's interests. It's that every child is so different. So I don't like giving umbrella approaches like, yes, this will work for every child. However, when you do lead with their play and their interests, it is individualized to your child. And you, as the parent, know them best. So you have that particular position to support them and guide them and help them in the best way. Even if you had to take your child to therapy, they're only getting seen like once or twice a week for maybe 30 minutes. So a lot of that carryover is reliant on the parents to do at home. So I just wanted it to be like an encouraging space that parents can see and help their child with their challenges at home.
And I see so many parallels with reading. You're talking about learning through play to learn how to eat new foods, and we learn through play with reading. And you were saying how when you're in therapy, it's only once or twice a week. The same is true for tutoring. And so you and I are both sharing tips for parents because no matter what your child is learning, they can learn through play, and you as the parent can teach them. You can absolutely do it.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, do you remember what kind of an eater you were when you were a kid? Because I definitely remember, and my family will tell me, I was very selective as a child. I eat a much more diverse group of foods now. My mom wouldn't even believe some of the foods I eat now because I was what would be called picky when I was a kid. Do you remember how you were?
I've always loved food. I even called my mom and was like, "Do you remember? Are we remembering this correctly?" And she was like, "Yes, you always eat like a balanced diet." I was like, "Really? Like I never like left broccoli on my plate or fought back or anything." And she was like, "You never like went through any extreme phases of super selectivity." But I've always had a good relationship with food.
That's great. And now you have two boys. And how has your experience been with them and their feeding journeys?
So I will say that I was very shocked, even with my training, the lack of like information and support for starting food with your child. Like you're told, like, oh, you can start solids, but it's like, what food am I going to feed them? How much am I going to feed them? Like, how does this process work? I had to go search for what do I feed my child? How much? Even with like my experience. But overall, it's been okay. We definitely went through one phase with my 3-year-old. All of a sudden, he would start picking out onions out of his food. And my husband like looked at me and he was like, "What do we do?" And I'm like, the supposed expert. And I was like, okay, well, we have to go back to like, I got to practice what I preach. We have to go back to play. And so that night I think it was like a stir fry. So he was really into like the Avengers. So I was like, well, we're going to find how many infinity stones are in your food. And he went through and he found all the colors, and we had to add play back into our diet. And before long, he was eating and not picking things out anymore. And yeah, the difference in when you add play, it just changes the whole game, because the more you force a child to take a bite and they feel that pressure, the more they're going to resist. So when you play and make it fun, the child like doesn't expect it, and it just takes that pressure off of them so that they are able to relax and have the chance to explore new foods.
Absolutely. And I'm sure all the parents listening are breathing a sigh of relief that even the experts in feeding will have their own child come up against some of these struggles. And so it is all kids. Nothing is wrong with your child if they are going through this phase or if they are struggling with feeding. It's just something that you want to get support. And Alex is a great support for that.
Thank you.
Now, most of the listeners of this podcast are parents of preschool and kindergarten age kids, and so around ages 3 to 5. So what would be your advice for that age group if a parent is struggling with what to feed their child? Maybe their child is picky. Maybe they only like to eat their safe foods. How would you help those parents? What kind of advice would you give them so that they can move forward in a healthy way?
Yes. So there are some sensory changes that happen during this age. So it is common to see pushback at certain times because their system is going through so many rapid changes that usually feeding is like at the top of the pyramid, and all of these other changes are going on underneath. And if something gets knocked off kilter, then it can really disrupt their ability to eat and want to explore new foods. So just being consistent with offering, even if you feel like you're wasting food, I would say offer a 1P, like a small amount of new food or non-preferred food alongside a food that you do think they're going to like. Remaining consistent with changing up variety and your responses to how you handle the pushback is super important. As much as we think that we want to offer different things, and if they don't eat this, they get another snack or they get a special pouch after because they didn't eat anything, they really need our consistency of this is what's for dinner. And if you're not going to eat the dinner, then that's, if your belly's full, then you can have something to eat the next morning. So just remaining that like calm and stable person for them during these times is really important.
When I was thinking to think in your own head, nothing has gone wrong if your child is giving you pushback, to expect that pushback, and that it's how you react is the most important part. So don't be surprised when you get that pushback, especially from that age group. I know from experience, but it's more how you are going to approach that pushback, I think, is probably the most important piece.
Yes. Yes, it's huge.
And it sounds like you follow the guidelines of the parent provides and the child decides. So I provide what's for dinner, and then the child can decide what they eat or how much they would like to eat of that dinner.
Yeah. So the division of responsibility is amazing. And it actually I feel like it takes pressure off of the parents, because then you don't feel like, oh, why is he not eating? It's my fault. Whereas if you remember the division of responsibility, it's more so you can change your mindset to being like, I did my job of providing, and it's their job to choose what to eat, how much, if any. I also like to suggest to clients and parents that even if they choose not to eat it, that's okay, but we can still learn about it. So this can look like getting curious with the food. Like, I wonder if that pea has a big smell or a little smell. I wonder what's inside. Do you think it's purple inside or green? And allowing them to explore with their senses that new food or that non-preferred food to help them work up those steps to eating and get them closer from a sensory standpoint to wanting to explore that food.
Yes, remind me, how many steps are there of eating? I know there are way more steps than most people think.
Yes. So there are 32 steps to eating. And Dr. Kay Toomey is actually the doctor who came up with this. Some children, like with autism, for example, sometimes need to repeat a few steps just because of how they learn. And they might need more like 50 steps. And then some children might need fewer steps. But on average, 32 steps to eating. So even if your child is poking it or smelling it, they're still learning about that new food and it's bumping them up closer to eating it.
And what a win that is, just to have them explore that new food.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
as the parents of this podcast are thinking about kindergarten, and they might be sending their child to kindergarten this year, and their child is going to be eating lunch at school and snacks at school, and maybe it's the first time that they've eaten outside the house. And I know from experience at schools, lunch is so fast. At our school, they get 20 minutes to eat. And if the teacher is late taking them to lunch, they will get less time. The cafeteria is so busy, so noisy, so much is going on. So, do you have any tips or advice for parents on how they can help set their child up for success in terms of eating at school?
Yes, there is so much going on, and going into kindergarten is such a huge change for our little ones. So during the summer, definitely preparing them for what's to come in the fall, maybe making meal times and lunches as enjoyable as possible, practicing with their lunch boxes, picking out new foods to explore this summer, things that they might want to have in their lunches for the fall. Because if you're trying to introduce new foods in the fall in a chaotic environment where they're watching their new friends and they feel rushed, probably is not going to help set them up for success. So this summer, or before kindergarten, just practicing with new foods. And then in the fall, just keeping new foods, if you are presenting them, very small. So maybe like I said, one pea or one like small piece of carrot in their lunchbox, and allowing them to have as much input in what goes in it, maybe helping pack the lunch so they're not so surprised when they open it at school. Asking them after school, maybe like, oh, what was good about this lunch? What should we change next time? What do your friends eat? Is a very big motivator for kids, especially with new foods. Like, what did you see your friend eat that looked really good to you? What food do you want to learn about? And just as much input as they can have, then I think that's going to help set them up for success. And just keeping our expectations low, like usually at the start of school in a new environment, they might not eat as much. So just being prepared that coming home with a lunch mostly full isn't the end of the world. Yes, we want to implement strategies to help make it more successful, but it does happen. They might eat a healthier snack. You can see if the food is still okay to serve them and hasn't gone bad. I know some foods have can't stay in the lunchbox too long, but representing the food if it's still okay for them for snack time after school could also be an option.
Yes, that is such a good tip. Both of my kids, when they started kindergarten, did not eat their full lunch. And it wasn't because they didn't like the food. It's just because it's such a short time. There's so much going on. And that is pretty common. And so they come home starving. They're so exhausted from their day. And so it's important to have a healthy snack ready for them after school. But then I would say once they got into the routine of school, it was no problem for them to eat their lunch in the cafeteria. And like you said, having them help pack the lunch Not only is that great so they know what's going to be served for lunch, but also for that independence in the morning. My little guy just graduated kindergarten and he was helping me pack his lunch almost every morning. And he knew we have a bento, which section had which type of food. So where the fruit went and where his crackers went and where the main was going to be. And we talked about the different types of food. What's a protein? What's mostly a carb? What does this food do for our body, so that he would kind of know the difference and how to pack a lunch that's going to have all of those components to it.
I love that. I love that so much. And I love watching their faces light up when they are part of our routines. Like, I think that sometimes they feel like they don't have a lot of power because we're mostly telling them what to do all day. But when they can help do like a mommy job, like packing lunches, they feel like they have power and input into it. And then they take more ownership of it. And then they're more excited about doing something that they helped with. So that's great.
And they're so proud. And I know you had a reel recently about this, that it's just fun for them. They just like to do what you're doing. They want to be with you. So if you're in the kitchen with them, helping them figure out how to pack that lunch, that's fun for them. They just love that special time together.
Yes.
No, we've been talking a lot about kindergarten, and one of the reasons we have is because you are a speaker at a brand new virtual kindergarten readiness conference called Learn and Play to K. So my friend Callie and I are the co-hosts of this conference, and we reached out to Alex to be our speaker about picky eating and how to help parents prepare their kids to eat, especially heading off to kindergarten, because of her expertise. So would you give us just a little sneak peek of that talk that you're doing for the virtual conference?
Yes, I'm so excited for this conference and being a part of it. It's such a wonderful group of women, and it's such a holistic approach to like a whole child approach to preparing your child for kindergarten. So my talk in particular is helping set your child up for success for eating in kindergarten. I talk about the developmental sensory changes that they go through at between ages 3 to 5, and how to just engage them in play, how they can help pick out foods at the grocery store, fun games to play, fun I Spy games to play in the grocery store, how to use some toothpicks and some cookie cutters to help make their lunches and help make it more engaging for them to want to try new foods. So it's packed with a lot of tips for how to use the summer to prepare and really break down the things that you can do on the weekends with your little ones, even if they go to camps during the summer, and how to just use meal times to your advantage and set them up for success.
I cannot wait to watch that talk. Even though my little guy is going to first grade, I know I'm going to get a lot of tips. Like I mentioned, he is more of a picky eater. And so I've already used some of your tips to help explore new foods with him. And so I'm super excited about your talk at the conference. So if you are interested in this conference, it is called Learn and Play to K. There are 18 amazing speakers. Alex is one of them. And we are going to be helping you set your child up for kindergarten in a holistic way. So, of course, we have Alex talking about picky eating. I'll be talking about reading. But we have so many speakers from diverse backgrounds that are going to be helping you set your child up for success. So if you are listening to this in real time on the day that it's released, the tickets are still available. You can go to bit.ly/learn and play to K. I will also link it down below so you can check it out. If you want to grab your ticket, you need to grab it soon because the doors are closing on May 31st, 2024. So you don't have much time when you listen to this podcast to go grab your ticket. And the conference itself will be June 3rd through the 7th, 2024. So Alex and I hope to see you in there. So as we are wrapping up this podcast, what would you love the biggest takeaway to be for parents?
I would love them to know that they are perfectly placed to help their child, no matter how picky or whatever challenges they're going through with eating, as well as knowing that small changes can make a huge difference for our kids. Sometimes it's as simple as if their feet are supported at the table, and it can just change the whole dynamic. So simple changes, and you are perfectly positioned to help your little ones.
I love that. It's so empowering for parents that it's not just something that's happening. You don't have any control over it. You can't change it. You have the power to make those simple changes and positively impact your child.
Absolutely.
That's great advice. All right. My very last question for you. I ask all of my guests this question. This is called the Littles Love Learning podcast. So I would love to know what you love about working with littles.
I love that there is never a dull moment. They keep us on our toes.
That is so true with what they say and what they do. Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. If people would like to connect with you and learn more about Tiny Bite Wellness and what you do, where can they find you online?
My website is tinybitewellness.com, and I do one-on-one parent consults, and I also have a picky eating guide and starting solids guide there. I'm also very active on Instagram at Tiny Bite Wellness. I like to hang out there.
Yes, she has the best reels. So if you are on Instagram, make sure you find her at Tiny Bite Wellness because her reels are usually very funny and very relatable. Well, Alex, thank you again for coming on the podcast, and I can't wait for the conference coming up, and I hope to chat with you soon.
No, I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Erin.